New Vitamin Water Zero Sugar Pineapple Passion Fruit is packed with vitamins, just like the amount of peas we packed in that sentence. It's packed like your tote bag, the one you stole from your ex, or your overpriced half a studio apartment, or extra rushed rush hour traffic. Packed like your calendar, triple booked at 5, of course. Grab a vitamin water. Did we mention it's packed with vitamins?
Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Alison, and I'm so glad you're here to discover what brings out the best of you. This podcast is all about breaking free from painful patterns, mending the past, and discovering our true selves in God. I can't wait to get started as we learn together how to become the best version of who we are with God's help. Hey everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of The Best of You. I'm so glad you're here today for a conversation that I think so many of you are going to find both refreshing and challenging in the best possible way. Today, I'm joined by fellow therapist and podcast host Trey Tucker, and this episode's a little different than some I've done in the past. It's really just a conversation between two therapists. We take turns diving into some of the hot topics we've both been wrestling with. You'll hear us unpack the rise of therapy speak on platforms like TikTok and Instagram, how it's helpful in some ways, but also where it's falling short. We talk about the dangers of over-identifying with a diagnosis, the nuance between real boundaries and emotional avoidance, and why resilience, not fragility, is one of the greatest gifts we can offer the next generation. And what I love about this conversation is Trey, number one, is a guy, so he has a different perspective than I do, but he also works primarily with young adults, with Gen Z and young millennials, whereas my focus is primarily on women. And so it was a really fun conversation to just tackle some of these topics from our two different perspectives. Trey is a licensed professional counselor, educator, and the host of the Rugged with Trey Tucker podcast, where he shares mental health insights with honesty and depth, especially for men and young adults. His work blends experience from the education world, private practice, and online spaces, where he's helping reframe what it means to be emotionally healthy in a culture that often confuses comfort with healing. This is one of those episodes where I genuinely forgot we were recording because the conversation was just so rich and it was just so fun to bat some of these ideas back and forth with a fellow therapist. I hope it speaks to you, encourages you, and maybe even challenges you to think a little differently. Please enjoy my conversation with Trey Tucker. So you're a therapist, you're in Chattanooga. What does your life look like there? Family, background, all the things.
Yeah, being a therapist is really fun. I actually came to it late in life. I kind of jumped mid-career. I started out in the corporate world. I was in marketing, and then I learned a lot, but also learned it wasn't really fulfilling. So I knew I wanted to really invest in people's lives on a one-on-one type of basis. And so I switched over. I started working in education. I was teaching and coaching, and the students, almost from day one, they would just bring me a lot of just tough life struggles. And I was honored by the fact that they were, but I always felt ill-equipped to really give them a solid answer. And so at some point along the way, a few years into that, I just decided, all right, I'm going to get a counseling master's. And as you know, that's no small undertaking. So I was working full-time still. So I was doing the part-time school thing to get the master's done. And now I still do a mixture of work in the education world and also in the private practice world. And also all these videos and podcasts and things that tend to become the beast that always wants to be fed.
Yeah.
So between that and mix, it's a really fun ride. Most mornings I wake up and it doesn't even feel like work that I'm getting ready to go do. It's just like, I can't believe I get paid for this. How about you?
Yeah, so I actually started as teaching too. That's interesting. I worked with adjudicated teens and I loved it as a teacher. I worked at a school for girls who were there because they'd been essentially put there instead of going to jail. I loved it. And so again, it was that blend of education, but also just these tough situations, family stuff. Most of them came from terrible families. This was in Wyoming where I grew up. And then that just sparked my interest in these dynamics. I went and got my master's degree and then went on to do my PhD, which is in both psychology and religion, because I was always toggling between the two, right? Just like you. And I'd love to hear more from you on that. There's the spiritual dimension of healing, but then there's the psychological. But then I got into like clinical psychology and it felt very void of the spiritual dimension. So I kind of flipped back to both and so that's kind of the big thing I try to tie together in what I do.
Yeah. Do you tend to find yourself coming down one side or the other in terms of which you access more with a client?
That's a good question. I don't see a lot of clients anymore, but whether with people, with clients in my own work, I can go back and forth. I can see issues with both. So in the faith world, I see the issues with over spiritualizing stuff, right? That is trauma or family patterns or brain. But then in the psychology world, I can get so frustrated with just what feels sort of empty, so focused on the individual, so focused on myself. And that was one thing I wanted to ask you, especially in the social media world of therapy, where everybody's kind of speaking the language. And sometimes I think, is this really got substance to it?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I'm getting more and more fed up with it. At first, especially the first probably couple of years, like 2020 and then 21, 22, I was thinking, all right, this is awesome. We're normalizing therapy and people are talking about their mental health. And then the last year or two, frankly, I just noticed people either becoming weak or staying weak, and they're using therapy language as a way to stay stuck. The word fragile just keeps coming in on my mind as I see a lot of these videos of like, you need to cut off your parents because they didn't give you everything you needed as a child, or if your friend didn't appreciate the full measure of who you are, you just need to walk away. I'm like, oh my gosh, like at what point did we expect the world to be perfect and our parents to be perfect? And then our response is, well, I'm just going to cut everybody off. I mean, that's a perfect recipe to stay weak. So there's my little soapbox, but we can go any direction we want. What do you think, though?
Well, this is what I was kind of hoping for, because looking at your account and looking at mine, we bring very different sort of energy, maybe more male, more female energy. And yet there's similar things that I see. The one that I see is the kind of I am my diagnosis, and a diagnosis as it's just my anxiety, or it's just this. And not that there aren't times and places for any of these things, right? You and I both know this. And also, it's almost like they become easy shortcuts. And to me, I see it as very similar to what I don't like simultaneously in the faith community, where there could be some of these cliches. Oh, God just took it away. That's sort of a magical fix that maybe happens in some instances. But the reality of messiness, all this stuff is messy. I talk a lot about boundaries. And at the one end, it was so important for me to learn boundaries. And then on the same side, I see this, that's just my boundary. And I'm like, I don't think that's a boundary. I think that's you putting up a brick wall and you don't want to deal with something,
Exactly. Hiding behind that brick wall and calling it a boundary.
Yeah.
The messiness, for sure. I totally resonate with that. I've gotten better at showing my mess just in my own life. For a long time, I just worked under the assumption that I need to look like I've got it all together, even though I know I don't have it all together. And like that wasn't a mental health thing. That was just a kind of my own background thing. But as I became a therapist, I started realizing, wait a minute, I'm a mess. And if I show my clients at least a little bit of my mess, then they're going to be more likely to reciprocate and open up as well. And it's had that same effect in friendships and family and whatnot. But yeah, we have to be willing to show our messiness and then tolerate it, because like you said, if everything is just clear cut and black and white, nothing's ever going to change.
There's no perfect conversation. So much of life is the rupture and then kind of trying to figure out how to come back to each other. So I want to get into vulnerability, because you talk a lot about that from a male perspective, and I think it's so interesting. Before we get there, let's close the loop on this sort of social media. So you create content, you have a podcast. Are you on TikTok?
Yeah, I'm in the wild world of TikTok and Instagram and all that.
So how do you, let's say as a parent, and even for our listeners who are parents, or for ourselves who might a kid that I never go down the TikTok rabbit trail, because I do. How do you delineate healthy and unhealthy? And how do you stay grounded in your own real messy life versus the social media version?
It was tough at first because when I first started making videos, I had no idea what I was doing. I still don't have a great idea of what I'm doing, but at least I'm a little less of a rookie. And so it really became almost an obsession. Like it took up almost all the real estate in my head of like, Any conversation I would have or any article I would read, I would find my brain starting to try to filter it towards, well,
Yes.
how can I make a video? Yeah,
Yes.
So over the last couple of years, though, I just realized like not only was that not helping the content, it was mainly not helping me. I just felt like I was short-tempered and tired all the time mentally. So now if I come up with an idea, I'll type it into a note in my phone and then I'll record it a whole lot less formally than I used to do it. And I'll care less if it does well. And as far as a parent, I mean, I'll tell you a story. You probably have something similar. I was in the grocery store about 2 months ago and I saw a daughter and her mom. The daughter looked to be around 14, 15 years old. The mom just walking around in front of her daughter on the phone. And I could tell the mom was watching some sort of, whether it's Instagram or TikTok, I don't know, but she was scrolling. The daughter was not. And the mom continually was like about to bump into stuff because she kept watching her phone. And the daughter said, "Mom, get off your phone and walk." So we as adults, we've got to model it. We're doing just as badly as teens are. And then so many parents, they hand their kid a phone or some sort of device at such a young age, and that brings in all kinds of other horrific things like pornography. But I think very soon we're going to realize this stuff is going to be like cigarettes ended up being in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, I think there's a reason the Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, has hit such a nerve.
Fully agree.
Yeah, what he's putting out there, I think there's a reason so many of us are recognizing. I think to myself, I grew up before really the internet. I got the internet in college, email. I am so grateful because I know the way my brain works. And I think it's different legitimately for different people. I think it would have been excruciatingly hard for me as a young girl comparing myself to others. It's hard enough now. I cannot imagine what it would have been before my brain was formed. And I'm just so grateful.
Oh, it'd be horrific. I tell people, especially the students that I teach, is like, there is an amount of money that I would take to go back into my teenage years, but we're talking like hundreds of millions to go back into this culture being a teenager, because whether it's social media or just other influences, yeah, the comparison trap is just horrendous. For a girl especially, I can't even imagine it.
Yeah, I think about it. I live in a small town. I grew up in Wyoming, and there's something about a small town where there's still that sense of there's dignity in just a certain job, working at a restaurant, being a postman. I used to work at the local restaurant. There was like dignity in it. And there's a place of belonging in an embodied community where it's like, oh, I see you. I know you. And I do this and you do this. And together we make this community run. And there's this sort of togetherness in that where everybody kind of has a place no matter what you're doing, whether you're the mayor of town or whether you're whatever. And I feel like that's what gets lost when you're comparing yourself to the globe.
Right. Yeah. Our brains were never designed to know what was going on in all over the globe at any given moment. I mean, you're talking about a source of anxiety, that alone causes plenty. But the smaller town vibe, I'm jealous of you because I personally think that's really how we were all wired to live. I don't know if it was John Eldridge or somebody, he really mapped this out in a longer way, but the gist of it is he thinks we should all be still living in small villages of about 100 to 150 people where the relationships happen like you're talking about and everybody has a dignified role and is seen and valued just because everything is more manageable instead of overwhelmed all the time.
You know how every home has that one spot you dream about all day, the place where you can finally exhale? For me, it's my bed. Honestly, my two sweet doodles are trying to sneak up onto it all throughout the day, and I don't blame them. The Cozy Earth sheets and cuddle blanket make it almost impossible to get up in the morning. And when I do, I live in their soft studio joggers or their bamboo stretch knit long sleeve pajama set. They are truly the comfiest clothes I own. It feels like carrying that retreat with me throughout the day. And here's the best part. You can try Cozy Earth bedding risk-free with their 100-night sleep trial. And once you feel this level of comfort, you'll understand why they back it with a 10-year warranty. Head to CozyEarth.com and use my code BESTOFYOU for 40% off. And if you get a post-purchase survey, make sure to let them know you heard about Cozy Earth right here on The Best of You. Because your bed should be more than a place to sleep. It should be your happy place. Cozy Earth makes that possible. Fall is in full swing, and it's the perfect time to refresh your wardrobe with pieces that feel just as good as they look. Luckily, Quince makes it easy to look polished, stay warm, and save big without compromising on quality. Quince has all the elevated essentials for fall. Think washable silk tops and skirts starting under $60, perfectly tailored denim, and wool coats that look designer level but cost a fraction of the price. And the quality is just as good, if not better. Quince partners directly with ethical top-tier factories and cuts out the middleman, which means they can deliver luxury quality pieces at half the price of similar brands. It's the kind of wardrobe upgrade that feels smart, stylish, and effortless. I keep reaching for their 100% Mongolian cashmere, the tee, the crew neck, and the cardigan in all different colors. They've become staples in my fall wardrobe because they're cozy, versatile, and so easy to mix and match. Keep it classic and cozy this fall with long-lasting staples from Quince. Go to quince.com/bestofyou for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/bestofyou to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/bestofyou. All right, Trey, switching gears. Are you trained in IFS or familiar with IFS?
I love IFS. I knew about it as a therapist. I was already trained in other things like CBT and EMDR and all the alphabets. But I always looked at IFS as this weird little thing where you have to like talk to things inside of you. Like, I'm not doing that. But I got to a point in my own anxiety where I was like, ain't nothing else working. And I know a lot of tools that should be working. And so I went to a therapist who was trained in IFS as basically like a last resort. And it has changed my life. So ever since then, I've tried to get more and more training because I want people to experience what I've done through it. So I'm assuming you're trained as well.
So I co-wrote Boundaries for Your Soul, which is a Christian adaptation of IFS. This is done pretty well among Christian therapists. So yes, I am familiar with it. It's really the heartbeat of everything I do. And to me, it was that perfect integration of faith, because in IFS, as you know, the self is the center, and we call it the spirit-led self, the place where you collide with the Spirit of God, with God's Spirit, right? That's where it was just so life-changing for me, because I was like, oh, this is where it all comes together. Like, a part of me loves being a therapist. A part of me is constantly pushing against therapy. A part of me loves church. And a part of me sometimes is like, oh, I don't like what they're saying. It just kind of made sense of all of these competing kind of aspects to me, and they're all part of me. And so it's just a way to understand more of how we're made in the image of God, which means we're really unique, and parts of us get hurt. And that doesn't mean that all of us is hurt.
Do you think it's accurate to say that IFS, from a spiritual perspective, takes us a little bit in a positive way back to a Genesis 2, like pre-Genesis 3, pre-fall, kind of a look at ourselves?
I love that you said that. Yes. I've not thought about it that way, but when people talk about the heavy emphasis on original sin, I do always think to myself, but when God first made us, we were good. And I do think is who we will become when we're finally on the other side. And we're not there yet, but there are glimmers of it. And so we kind of go through in Boundaries for Your Soul. When we go through that section, we talk about, in John 14, where Jesus says, I'm leaving you, but I'm leaving you with a comforter, a counselor who will come to be with you, who will come to live in you, which is the Spirit. And so that becomes this, there is a place inside where suddenly we can connect to a glimpse of that truest version of ourselves. That's the hope, right?
Right. Okay, that's helpful. I'm going to use that. I'll give you credit, I promise.
I would love to hear from you as a guy. Tell me a little bit more about your journey with anxiety and how that really unlocked things for you, because I get questions from listeners often. A lot of my listeners love incorporated parts language, even if they've never done, IFS therapy. But how do I help my spouse understand this? I have mostly female listeners, or even my sons understand this. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah. Anxiety, I'm thankful for it, both its positive traits and not so pleasant traits, because I see now that it's actually trying to help me. And I'm thankful for the unpleasant parts of it, because it gives me more of an empathy for my clients who also have it. And they can be so uncomfortable. And when I first started dealing with it, I was not a therapist, so I had really no tools. So I basically treated the anxiety as the enemy, like this thing's trying to attack me, so I'm gonna hit it back. And then I would start to beat myself up for it. Like, why can't I just get rid of this stuff? And I'd even over-spiritualize it, like you mentioned earlier, like won't be anxious for nothing. That's what Paul says. That's a whole nother soapbox. But it culminated into my first couple of years of actually being a therapist. And I still had it in my head that anxiety was the enemy. I don't think I would have said it like that, but that's how I approached it with clients. And I think I gave them some short-term relief, but I never was able to really help them get to the root issue. And then my own struggles with the anxiety internally kept coming up. So I'm like, all right, something's not working. I need, the whole phrase, nothing changes if nothing changes. I'm not very smart, but I'm at least smart enough to know I need to change an approach if it ain't working. So I thought, all right, I'll give this IFS thing a shot, even though it's the weirdest concept I've ever heard of. But I tell you what helped me was that movie Inside Out.
Yes.
And I'm normally not a cartoon watcher, but like when I saw that, I'm like, oh, okay. So if you could look at emotions like this, then a couple of things could be true. Number one, they're trying to help. They're just kind of misguided sometimes. And number two, they're not me. So I don't have to beat myself up for it. So it's like, I'm not my anxiety. I'm not my thoughts. It's these other parts in me that think they're helping. So in terms of my own anxiety, yeah, one of my wounds or like injuries that I talk about is the thought is not good enough and forgotten. Like those two thoughts from past moments have been kind of the messages that have tried to stick around in me. And thanks to IFS, don't weigh on me nearly as much anymore. But when I start to get anxious or some other not so healthy emotion, then I start realizing like, okay, something's hitting this bruise. If somebody hits the bruise that we already have physically, we're going to overreact to that because there's already pain. So anyway, long story short, IFS helped me realize I can actually connect to this little thing in there that's pumping the anxiety. And it took a long time because there was so much skepticism and so much brain fog. But when I finally did connect with that part, I realized like, dang, this thing is working overtime, is very exhausted trying to help me out by scanning for possible things that might cause me more pain like I'd experienced in the past. And it really like broke my heart in a good way for that part because it seemed like a little 5-year-old toddler that was really trying to do its best, but just didn't know any better, but it was working its tail off trying to help.
That's beautiful. You talk a little bit in some of your content about father wounds. Does that come out of your own experience? And how do you describe that for others?
Yeah, the answer to my own story is yes, and it's in everybody's story because just like we talked about a few minutes ago, ain't nobody got a perfect parent. Nobody got a perfect dad. Nobody got a perfect mom. And so the wounds are going to happen. Like, sorry, it's just the question of which ones you're going to get. And thankfully, I had awesome parents. And as awesome as they were, there were still gaps because my dad's dad left the family when my dad was 10 years old. And so he never really had a model for like, not just how to be a dad, but just how to grow into a man. And so he picked up a lot of knowledge and skills along the way from mentors who invested into him. But inevitably, there were still some parts that were kind of unfinished in him. And any unfinished parts in us are going to get passed along to how we treat our kids or the people around us. So yeah, I've got my own father wounds. And a book that really opened my eyes to this is called Fathered by God. It's also by John Eldredge. And I would encourage women to read it as well, but it's really written for men because it takes you through the stages of a man's life from boyhood all the way through the elderly years. And it talks about like, here are the things that really ideally should happen to a boy as he becomes a man in each of these stages. And most of the things that should happen to us have to do with our father investing in us in some way. And so he also talks about the inevitable moments where a dad is, slightly imperfect or as extreme as left the family altogether. And he shows, okay, here's how you can get what you missed out on from your relationship with God the Father, because ultimately he's the perfect dad and we're his kids. And if we can let him father us both as sons and as daughters, that's really what's going to make us whole. So that's the gist of my journey, but I notice it in every single person that I get deep enough with, but especially every client, is there's at least a parent wound partially responsible for whatever they're struggling with in the moment.
I love how you're talking about it. I can tell just in this conversation, you and I share a sort of really genuine longing for nuance because it is true that we all have parent wounds.
Yeah.
We just do. There's no perfect family. And that's also not to lay blame.
Right.
I know my kids are going to come to me, they do. I think that's part of where the health lies, right? Is they're like, why did you just say that? Or you just broke about, and I'm like, oh, right. You just cannot be there at every moment. And when you were talking about IFS and then you're talking about God, to me, that was so much the power. Similarly, for me, as it took away blame. I don't have to get this from my parents because I can now connect to the part of me that didn't make the basketball when I was in 7th grade and felt so ashamed and felt like I'll never be good enough and I'll never be chosen. And I can find that part of me. And God, there is a way to that part of me that no imperfect human could reach. And that's just the reality of this journey. So I really relate to a lot of what you're saying with all of that.
The nuance is key because, like you said, if we allow ourselves to stay in blame, what we're really implicitly saying is that we're expecting earth to be heaven. And if earth is perfect and heaven, then we don't really need heaven. So, like, I don't know. Sorry, earth ain't perfect. Newsflash. So even atheists who I think would agree with that statement, we got some problems here. So since it's broken, we can't expect perfection from other people.
And so this gets at resilience. And you talked earlier about this idea of fragility. We have to be able to live in a world that will hurt us. What's on your heart and what do you want people to know, whether it's your clients, whether it's listeners and all the work that you do about that?
Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because sometimes I think I come across maybe too strong on it, but I keep reminding people you can handle this. And even if you can't fully handle this right now, you can build your strength to the point that you can eventually handle it. I come from a sports world and a weightlifting kind of world. So, for example, if I'm trying to back squat 400 pounds, that's too much for me. Like, I will collapse under that weight. But if I start with 200 pounds and slowly increase my ability to handle the weight little by little, then eventually I'll be able to handle 400 pounds. So I can do it. It's not something that I need to walk away from forever. And I think handling challenges in life is the same way. It's like, yeah, it might be too heavy for you right now, but just keep coming at it because you got the ability. You just got to pull that ability out little by little.
I love how you're saying it. I heard a story, and I can't remember where I heard it, but it was a woman talking about how her daughter was struggling and they were trying to get her into therapy. And I hear this all the time, got to get my kid into therapy. And someone said to her, I wonder if she needs to get into a sport.
Yes.
I think sometimes the kid does need therapy, but there are lots of ways we build those muscles, to piggyback on your metaphor. And one of them is for someone to get in there and help us see the parts of ourselves that have been broken and that are fragile and that need care. And another way is to kind of build those muscles through doing the hard thing. And to your point, don't throw yourself into something you cannot handle, but to walk into something that's going to challenge you a little bit, that's going to test you a little bit, that is going to be scary a little bit, to see, oh my gosh, I can do it. And I do think that's that balance that we need, especially from our end where there is a almost too quick, I got to get my kid into therapy. Again, I want to be really clear for the listener. I think sometimes a really great therapist can be helpful for your kid. And also there is another side to that. So I appreciate your speaking into that. At this point in my life, I'm less interested in surface answers and more drawn to scripture that speaks to both the heart and the mind. And that's why I've been spending time with the new NIV Application Bible from Zondervan. It's not just another study Bible. It's an experience that helps you truly understand what scripture meant in its original context and what it can mean for your life today. The original meaning notes provides clarity around each passage, while the application notes help connect those teachings to the real, everyday moments we're walking through now. Each book begins with a thoughtful introduction, and there are questions for growth woven throughout, inviting deeper reflection, not just information, but transformation. I've also appreciated the Character of God articles, which give rich insight into who God is across all of Scripture. If you're looking for a Bible that helps you really live the Scriptures, not just read it, this is a beautiful resource to explore. Learn more at nivapplicationbible.com. That's nivapplicationbible.com.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. Start converting your B2B audience today. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started today at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Well, I'm glad you said it about therapy being helpful, but not necessarily the right time or thing for a particular circumstance. Because you tell me what you think about this, but especially in a teenager, if a parent talks to me about the option of therapy, one of my first questions/suggestions is, all right, first, do they have any sort of community involvement, whether it's a sport or instrument where they're part of a band or something bigger than themselves that they're a part of and have to be relational and work, like you're saying, work through difficulty, building a skill. And number two, do they have anything where they're having to serve? This doesn't necessarily have to be community service officially, but something like that, because I'm sure you've seen how much research there is about that. Service is really one of the things that grows us the quickest at any age, but especially for a teen, before they just dive into therapy, I want to know those two things.
Yeah, those are really helpful. I think for me, I'm looking at the parent and I'm thinking to myself, can the parent be a resource to kind of anchor the child as the child is stepping into some of these? I want to work with the parent to help equip the parent to help the child navigate what's hard. At the same time, I understand there are situations where the parent can't. And that's where then I see the therapist coming in, whether it's one parent where that therapist can come in as sort of the co-parent, or where the parents are just not able to do it and the therapist is kind of helping the kid navigate. And so that's kind of how I've looked at it. As I don't think it should be a substitute. A therapist can be really helpful, but they're still not pulling the kid out of the hard things. They're empowering and equipping the child to navigate the hard things. So I never want to do it apart from parents. I always want to do it kind of understanding the whole system there.
Yeah, I love that. What do you do in those situations when the parent almost can't help themselves but pull their kid out of a struggle?
To me, that then becomes a conversation with the parent, some education around what they need most is to know that you can be with them and you're not going to buckle or fold during their hard time.
Yeah.
Because so often it's the parent's anxiety. I can't handle it that my kid isn't X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, then the kid's anxiety is really spiking because they already feel it and then they feel yours.
Yeah, they're responsible for two people.
Yeah, so try to help the parent be like, I get that this is hard. I hate it with you. When do I need to intervene? If you're being bullied mercilessly at school, when do I need to advocate for you? When do I need to be that safe place when you come home and be like, you did it. You made it through another tough day. And I will be here every single day because I'm okay. I think so often that's the work for the parent. And for me, that's always been a tricky one. I always want to help the parent because I do think it's such an important role. It's not everything. We're not going to be perfect, but the more we can grow, boy, that's what our kids need the most, is that we're going to be okay. Because God doesn't always save us out of everything, right? But God is always right there going, I'm here. I'm not leaving. I see how brave you're being. I know it's hard. You can come back to me. I'll heal your wounds. I'll give you a big hug. And then we're going to send you back out tomorrow. There's a little bit of that back and forth that we have to learn as parents.
Yeah, man, you're good at this. It's almost like you need to write a book or something. And I'm glad you're working with parents so intently on that, because one of the things I've noticed when a parent pulls their kid out of a struggle, the message that gets sent to the kid is, you can't handle this. The parent would never say that verbally, but that's the implied thing, is like, you can't handle it, only I can, so sorry, you don't have what it takes, and you're going to have to keep relying on me forever.
Yeah. I know you do a lot of work with young adults. Is that right?
I do, yeah. Mostly people in their 20s and early 30s, and that's such a tough age range. I personally think that for a man especially, that age 22, 23 is at least one of the toughest times in his life, if not the toughest, because especially if he's gone to college, everything has changed. His city has changed. He's no longer a student, so part of his identity has changed. His friend group changed. His routine is changing. He's having to adjust to really the first real job and all the different pressures and expectations that come with that. So it's just a torrential downpour of new stuff to have to either move on from or adjust to. And so often they come to me just struggling to pivot and figuring out, who am I now? And like, what do I do next? So that's my favorite age to work with.
So you're kind of with Gen Z, some young millennials. What are some of the things you're seeing that give you concern, and also the things that give you hope?
Yeah, we'll start with the concerns and get those out of the way, because I think the concerns are pretty much universal to the age, but maybe a little more emphasized in the 20s, is that they were the first generation to spend a pretty decent amount of time of their youth having phones, if not in their hands, but in front of them. And so a lot of my concern is, not everybody here, but a lot of people at that age have I hate to say it, but a lack of ability to just talk face to face and connect and stick through maybe some of the awkward, silent moments of a conversation without immediately reaching for the phone to bail them out of the awkwardness. General social skills is one of them. There is more of a self-focus, I think, partly because of some of the therapy language that you were talking about earlier. Is like, it's all about self-love and your truth and all that. Like, I think that revs off even in people that don't realize it. But I also notice the positive end, they can see through BS really quickly. I think quicker than people in their 30s, 40s and up. And because of that, they see the cultural lie that is this whole hustle culture and you got to be rich by 25. Like, they'll fall for it for a little bit, but somewhere in those early 20s, they realize, like, this is empty. This doesn't actually do what it's claiming to do. So they want a purpose and realize that there's a calling on their life, and they're really passionate about trying to discover that. So those things give me a lot of hope. But do you work with this age at all, or is it more in the 30s and up?
Not as much, which is why I'm curious. My own kids are in their 20s, so I get a little window through them, but also I get it through just my own forays into reality television or, whatever you're kind of seeing out there. And I don't like stereotypes. And also, I know from my own IFS work and my own work, boy, was I not quite ready and still forming. And we know this from brain research between like 20 and 26. I mean, how much I still needed guidance. And you're making major decisions.
Yeah. Maybe the biggest decisions in your life.
And you're just expected to kind of hit 18 and go to college and be ready for all of this. And so the fact that you're stepping into that gap is just beautiful. To me, that's like a perfect time to go see a therapist or to kind of make sure you have that connection to someone a little bit older and wiser. It's so smart.
Definitely. What do you notice with the folks you work with the most?
I think some of what we're saying with the moms, it's the getting on top of our own stuff, our own anxiety, that, we're differentiated from the stuff our kids are going through. Because so often, especially my generation, we're kind of now doing the inner work and going, oh, the anxiety I feel is separate and different from the anxiety they feel. And so I've got to do that work inside of me so that I can be this calm presence that's not reactive or not over-parenting, right? Because we got a little bit more of the seen and not heard childhood, right? The less emotionally attuned. And there's pros and cons to that, right? You can celebrate the old days, we're out in the streets until dark and nobody's checking on us. And there is a beauty in that. And also, there wasn't as much of that emotional attunement through the hard times, right? So then we come in as parents and we're attuning to everything. Right? It's just so fascinating, right? The cycles. And like, it's actually what our kids need is for us to just be like, you're fine, like you're going to be okay, to some degree or another, not to overstate it. But so that's a little bit more of the always trying to help discern, when do I need to step in and when? These are just some growing pains and I'm here and I see it. And also, so it's more of that kind of thing. So, I tell you what, just this conversation makes me realize how much we really all need to stay in conversation with each other. We need community.
Absolutely. I think that's the biggest battle against the screens, is the screens are keeping us isolated and we were built for connection.
Yeah. Just this conversation with you makes me feel like I see things more clearly, and all that will trickle out into the work that I'm doing. So I'm really grateful.
Me too. Same here with you. I'm glad we're in the fight alongside each other, because you're bringing perspectives and ways of saying things that I hadn't thought of. So let's keep this going.
I hope my listeners will come find you, and maybe you could tell us where folks can find you and they can listen to both of us and get different perspectives, but also a lot of like-mindedness.
Yeah, totally. I think we're saying the same thing with just different vernacular. So I want my folks to connect with you as well. So on my side of the things, @Rugged Counseling is the handle on pretty much everything, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all the things. I've got a podcast as well. I'm a rookie at it. I know you're much more skilled at it than I am. And so I'm trying to get to your level at it. So it's out there too if people want to see that.
What's the podcast called?
It's called Rugged with Trey Tucker. I'm a simple dude, so I just try to keep it all simple in names too.
I think it's great. And this has just been a delight. I'm just so grateful we got to connect in this way.
Me too. This has been awesome. Highlight of my week right here. Thank you so much for your time.
Me too. Thank you, Trey. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of The Best of You. It would mean so much if you take a moment to subscribe. You can go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts and click the plus or follow button. That will ensure you don't miss an episode and it helps get the word out to others. While you're there, I'd love it if you leave your 5-star review. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday. And remember, as you become the best of who you are, you honor God, you heal others, and you stay true to your God-given self.